Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very successful entrepreneur from UAE, a fellow YPO member, Mr. Rohit Dev. Rohit, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. Rohit is the founding partner of Ideas 91, which is a knowledge advisory and distribution company. And he is bridging the gap between manufacturers and retailers. And as I just mentioned, he's a fellow member of the YPO. So Rohit, let's talk about Ideas 91. These are two separate businesses, as you mentioned. One is a knowledge advisory and the second is a distribution company. So let's start with knowledge advisory. Tell me, what is the kind of work you are doing?
So Ashutosh, I've always been in the consumer product space, and being in that space, I realized there were multiple pain points that we faced when we are doing that business. From the start of buying the product, who do we buy it from if we are not manufacturers, to the full supply chain. We realized over a period of time that having a repository of knowledge is great. So we thought that, and the number of brands that are coming up because of e-commerce, etc., is large. So we said, how do we create that value? And we came out with PEAK, which is performance and procurement excellence achieved through knowledge. That's our knowledge advisory. Okay, and it came about because of the pain points we were facing in our business, and we said, what are the pain points and how do we come up out of those? In terms of what we cover, so product, when a person wants to start a new product, he doesn't know which factory to go to, etc. So we actually understand the brand ethos, we understand the thought behind the brand, and then we build products.
So Rohit, you mentioned that you have a very good understanding of brands and you know what big brands want. Tell me, what do big brands want when they reach out to you?
So we work, like I told you, in the knowledge advisory side, we work on different aspects. One multinational reached out to us that, they have a great product for the Western market, but they wanted to get the product into the emerging markets, including India. Audio product. So they said the cost for us is not sitting, right? So we actually, our technical team worked with them to map the same sound signature and give the product at the cost that was commercially viable for an emerging market. Similar examples across other appliances exist for us. So multinationals, most of the multinationals globally have built products for the Western market and are generally face a challenge when they want to launch a product into an emerging market. So I think we help them in that in a very big way. The other thing that they look for is speed and commitment of delivery. So we actually give delivery as per what we commit versus, a lot of people, when they give a commitment, does not stand. So these are two primary things that I think global companies look for, and that actually helps them save a lot of cost because it brings their inventory holding costs down, and it is something that creates value for them across the product range.
Fascinating. So, when I remember many, many years ago when we used to launch products in the Middle East, the general impression used to be that the Middle East is one big market. And I often said that the culture in every market of the Middle East is different. So my question to you is, how does culture impact, marketing a product, and how does your knowledge of culture help the brands?
So, very, very true, Ashutosh. It is not one big market. It is a lot of different markets. And I'd love to make an analogy with India. Every state is different in India, right? Every state has a different culture. So we have to work with cultures, and being on the ground, we work in Middle East very strongly, we work in Africa very strongly, we work in the Indian subcontinent very strongly. So we understand cultures of different markets, and that is something that we do bring to the table for our customers. We work with them to understand what is the product the consumer would want, what is the price level that would be acceptable, what is the packaging that would work. So we work across those areas to make them feel, to make them successful.
Interesting. Because I have seen, when I remember when we launched something in Saudi Arabia, the billboards were all at half the pole height, so that people sitting in cars could see it.
See that, yes.
Do you have any other interesting examples like this across markets?
Well, in Saudi Arabia, you have to have Arabic, which is very, very critical. But for us, what we understand is, and things have evolved, but 10 years back, point of sale was very, very critical. Being at the point of sale and being visible to the customers at point of sale was very important. Today, that point of sale has moved from offline to online, but that point of sale and understanding where the customer is very important.
So one more question, Rohit, relating to the knowledge advisory business before I move to distribution. I'd love to get your perspective on how the consumer has evolved and changed in your markets over the last 2 decades.
So what I partly answered in the earlier thing, right?
Yeah.
So our customers are businesses, including retailers who do private labels. So our customer, how they've evolved, and what they were doing was they were working with us on the product piece. And over a period of time, pricing became very important. So we started working with them to make them understand that a price is not just a function of the cost of the product. It is also a function of an MOQ. For example, a lot of people, when they're buying, if they buy a full container of a product, they would say, I'm getting a better price. But we say, evaluate the cost versus your inventory carrying cost. Does that make sense? A lot of organizations, even today, global organizations don't work on that fact. So we bring that knowledge in how many days will you sell out, and can we replenish that stock? Does that bring your cost down versus a cost of the product? Because the cost of the product itself is immaterial unless you study the whole cost. Correct. So, and we've moved from being that organization that only used to work on the cost of the product to that whole value chain. So for our customers, that's the value we bring. In terms of working with retailers on private label, the thought process in all the retailers, and we've launched brands like Choreo for Big Bazaar. So we've launched certain products of Smart Buy for Flipkart. So they always work on the fact that what is the lowest price. So we actually work with retailers now to enhance their brand image. How can the brand become much bigger, and how the consumer, because consumer today is wanting to buy after understanding the brand. So the final consumer has evolved by actually reading much more about the brand and product. Whereas 10-15 years back, the consumer used to go pick up the lowest price and say, let's try it. So that's how consumers have evolved, both on consumer side and the B2B side.
Fascinating. So now let's talk about the second part of your business in Ideas 91, which is your distribution business. Tell me about what you are doing in this business.
So, so I've always been passionate about seeing the consumer buy my product, right? I want to see that. That's the thrill. And you being from ITC, I'm sure you have that thrill as well, going to the retailer and seeing is my item selling or not, right? So I've always been with that thrill. So we said, let's get into distribution. In that we have Frigidaire as a brand for us in kitchenware, but we also developed our own brand, RD. Okay. That came about because everybody talks about food, so we should buy organic food, we should eat healthy, etc. And I was 30 kilos more than what I am today.
Yeah.
And we were moving to a healthier lifestyle. We had seen people come down with cancer, close friends. So we said, in the appliance space, how do we create a thoughtful brand? That's how the thought of RD came about. So, today we make kettles, but we don't make plastic kettles. We make it out of ceramic. Okay. We recommend stainless steel and ceramic in anything in which food or water comes in contact. So we created RD, which is a brand that cares about you, cares about your health, cares about your family. We want to remove the use of chemicals. So, I get surprised. I have friends who tell me, I order organic food, and when I go to his house, he has a plastic kettle where he boils water. I say that there's a anomaly there, right? So that's how RD came about, and we're really passionate. We're now in 21 countries, and I think we want to take it across the world and make living healthy and fun.
Amazing. So, when I was reading about you, I think RD was a well-kept secret. I somehow never got to know, but now I see it on your T-shirt as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk about RD then.
Yeah.
Tell me about what goes into building a brand. One, of course, is distribution, but the other part is the product. So
Yes.
what have been some of your challenges and learnings as you've built RD?
Our biggest challenge, and Deepika, my wife, leads the product development in this, and she is the full brains, and she's I would say she's the gatekeeper of the brand. She will not, so a lot of our customers are distributors, and they'll say, we need price, let's do a plastic kettle. So that is one of our biggest challenges when we work with our distributor. So our challenge in trying to promote healthy living is that consumers will not buy, right? So we're working very extensively on educating the customer. That is, I think, one of the key challenges for any brand that wants to create a difference, because most brands work on price. Most people work on price. So how do you create that difference? And I think we're targeting to create a community around RD, around healthy living and fun living, and that's important. For example, we are launching kitchenware again without non-stick, because non-stick is so unhealthy. But again, a lot of people, everyone uses non-stick at home, but you're ingesting chemicals the moment you heat in that. So I think a big challenge is educating the customer, telling them to pay a little extra, which will, and I always say cost in a total. So cost in total, if you consider your health and you consider the cost of the product, if you buy the little more expensive product, your cost will actually come down in a lifespan. So.
Amazing. So, when Deepika is actually designing some of these products, and I'm sure she's working with top designers, where are you getting a lot of this knowledge of? For example, I had no idea that non-stick is unhealthy, and I'm going to tell my wife to have a relook, because everything is non-stick in our home. But the fact that you are building RD as a sustainable brand in today's world, I'd love to understand what goes into the technology or getting the learnings of building so many different products.
So we work on product categories at a time. So Deepika will work with the team, and they work on product categories. They understand what people use. Then they understand, is it healthy or not? If it is not healthy, what are the alternatives that can get created? And that's very, very important before they start working. If what we are currently using is great, then they don't look at that category. So then we may actually launch the product as a similar product to someone else, because we want to fill the brand portfolio. But for example, today, lunch boxes, many lunch boxes, either you have that big lunch box, which I think is very cumbersome to carry. So we're designing a lunch box that actually has stainless steel compartments and can keep the food hot, right? So that is something that is different, right? So we keep doing stuff that would make a difference. I tell Deepika, I want my lunchbox to go into my laptop bag, which I can carry, right? So that's things that people with focus groups, etc., they come to know and they develop.
I love this. The CEO telling the product development boss that get it, I want it like this, and then the team gets to work.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And
no,
where
but
do you
she's
get
the
all
boss.
that I agree with you. That I don't deny at all.
Yeah.
But where do you get all this, fabrication and manufacturing done?
So because we've been in the business for so many years, we understand manufacturing. We don't manufacture, but we understand manufacturing. And that is why, that is a strength in both our businesses, and both the businesses are intertwined. So for example, I say RD is a customer of our Peak business because the knowledge we have gained over the years, we can deploy into RD. So we work with manufacturers in India, in Turkey, in China, in Malaysia, Vietnam, to build the product, right? And we develop that, and then we take it to market. And that is also what we bring on our knowledge advisory for all the other brands. So RD would, like I said, just be one customer of our Peak business.
Amazing. And would it be right to say that RD is currently B2B, but evolving into B2C?
Yes, it is currently B2B. We work through distributors in various countries, and we are targeting to, means we are on the digital platform in a number of countries, and we are targeting to make the digital the bigger pie compared to the offline.
Amazing. And are you available in India?
Currently not, but launching, I think, in March.
Oh, wonderful. So all our viewers and listeners must look out and watch out for the RD brand. And I'm assuming it'll be on Flipkart, Amazon, and all the other platforms. Yes. Fantastic. So let me move on, Rohit. And it's for someone who's been doing so much distribution, I'd love to get your perspective on how is technology changing the distribution business?
So technology, e-commerce is changing a lot in the distribution business, right? Earlier, everybody used to go to the shop and buy the product. Now the product has to come to you. Correct. So last mile delivery is very important. And that, I think technology is helping last mile delivery in a very big way. Outside of that, technology overall in our supply chain business, working with B2B customers, including Fortune 500, we see technology has helped create information. 20 years back, we did not have that much information in a readable and understandable format. Today, any report is accessible. I know what stock of our organization is lying. I know how it is going to get dispatched. There are now softwares that actually make us see the raw material incoming to our manufacturer producing the goods. So there's all visibility to this. So technology has actually brought in a lot of information, which helps in decision making.
Okay.
Outside of that, the final consumer wants to sit at home and get goods delivered. In terms of warehousing, we see a lot of small warehouses coming up everywhere for last mile delivery, right? So I think that is also technology becoming, so that's also possible because there is so much automation coming in. Otherwise, last mile warehousing would actually create a lot of pilferage, would create a lot of other issues that today are getting removed because of technology.
And from this small warehouses that you just spoke about to deliver the last mile, and you're in a region which is so open to adapting so much amazing technology, what is the role you see of drones?
So drones, I think Amazon has actually patented a drone. I don't know if you've read about it. They've actually patented a drone that can actually give, tell if a person is shooing the drone away or telling them to come. It's great technology, but I think a lot of regulation has to come in for that actually to happen, because there are a lot of risks to it. There are risks of, because the drone, it's being monitored, people can see, right? So privacy becomes an issue. There's other things, what is the goods being carried becomes an issue. So there is a lot of regulatory things that need to be put in for drones to come in. I think technology is already being built. A lot of organizations are trying it, but again, regulation will be very critical for its success.
Very interesting. So Rohit, I've got one more question for you, and then I'll move to Electa, which is the brand you created in Middle East and Africa. Before we started recording, we were talking about millennials and the Gen Zs. Given the amount of work you're doing in your knowledge advisory business with RD and your distribution business for others, how are the expectations of millennials and Gen Zs changing the way you do business?
So, like I said, millennials and Gen Zs, there are two aspects. Millennials and Gen Zs are much more online. So earlier, where TV advertising used to work extensively, today influencer marketing works much more extensively. So the people they follow are the people who can recommend what they buy.
Correct.
Another aspect of business in the product space, and you would have seen that, is 20 years back when I used to go to a shop, I used to ask the salesman for his recommendation.
Correct.
Today, the millennials and Gen Z do not want that recommendation. They want to go online to see the reviews and ratings.
Yeah.
So any brand that has to succeed has to get people to talk about them, right? And talk about what their features, etc. are, and be very vulnerable to people saying good things and bad things, and iterating for the good and bad.
Interesting. So Rohit, I've got time for one more question, and I'm going to move to Electa, which is the brand you have created for the Middle East and Africa. Tell me about this brand and the products that you take under this brand.
So this was when I started my journey. It was a partnership between my uncle and me, and we created one of the largest home appliance brands out of the Middle East. I exited that business in 2010 and started Ideas 91. It was a great journey. For me today, I am much more passionate about my knowledge advisory business and RD, because that is what drives me. Okay. In terms of knowledge advisory, and so we are helping a lot of startups and entrepreneurs and retailers. So we work with small, medium, and big customers to help them create their brand, their product. We work with them not only on product development, we work with them on brand building and monetizing and growing their sales. So we work with organizations in this knowledge advisory piece to help them create value. Okay. And that is something that I'm really passionate about.
Okay, so I've got time for one last question, and I'm going to ask you a very general question. You work in the Middle East and Africa. Share with me some interesting experiences that you've had in these two markets and how they are different.
So in terms of work, or in terms of first time I landed into Africa, I thought I was going to get robbed, right? But that's a perception we have, which was so wrong. I think they are such friendly people, right? Again, in the Middle East, we have perceptions. When I moved to the Middle East, when I moved to Dubai in 1998, and Dubai, I think, has given me so much. It's given me everything that I have. I think it is such an open country. Today, people know about Dubai, but in 1998, it was just evolving, right? I think in Middle East and Africa, understanding the culture, our making friends is something that has really helped me in understanding and growing our business, right? People are very, very welcoming. People are very warm. And I think that is something very important. Interesting experiences include people working in Africa. I don't know if you know, in Rwanda, when I first landed in Rwanda, first time, do you know Rwanda does not allow plastic bags? It's a country that does not allow plastics. Now, you would not imagine that out of an African country, because you've been to so many countries, right? So you have, every country has its charm. I love to travel. I love to see the differences in each country. And I think there's great learning in each country.
Absolutely. Rohit, on that note, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me about Ideas 91, about the amazing work you're doing as a knowledge advisory, not just for your customers, but also supporting startups and entrepreneurs. Thank you for talking to me about RD and all the work that you're doing there. And thank you for talking to me about a little bit about YPO. We didn't have time to talk more about YPO, but you and I are fellow YPOs. So thank you again and good luck for RD.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.